Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about The Boys, Season 4, Episode 5. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I'm going to break these down by sections where, like, the locations where story beats happens and stuff like that. First and foremost, let's start off with the VIDS stuff, where we're at V52, which obviously is kind of like a parody of like D23, Disney's like kind of con convention thing, especially when they're like, yeah, we'll go over all these things that are coming up in so much details, when again poking fun at like those whole situations. But and it wasn't just like a dig at Disney and Marvel, it was also digs at DC as well. I only assume, like, when you hear the 52, you're like D52. I'm like, I'd assume that's like the new, supposed to be like, only 52 I can think of is like New 52 from DC. So that's what only thing I can pull from. Tech Knight was on stage being like, oh, it's been a year since my last movie, so you know what? I think it's time for a reboot. I was like, okay, so that's a shot at so many properties getting rebooted, but specifically because his movie's supposed to be like The Batman. So it's like, okay. Because he's like, yeah, we have like this 12-minute long pitch black sequence, which I didn't have this complaint. To be fair, I haven't seen the movie since it was originally out, so I haven't seen it since like, 2022 when it was in theaters. But that is a complaint I've heard some people have about the movie, that was too dark. It's been not like tones-wise, but like from a cinematography standpoint, they felt like the movie was like, there are very dark sections in the movie. Either way, so it kind of feels like it's supposed to be like a shot at that, but also it's kind of like, oh, it hadn't been that long since the previous Batman movie. I mean, I guess it's like, because didn't Zack Snyder's Justice League come out like a year or so beforehand, before the Batman? Didn't that come out 2021, and because the Batman got pushed to 2022 because of like the pandemic and stuff like that, so production, tangents on all that side. I'm not going to remember every little thing that kind of came up during those conversations, but I am going to like pick up on some stuff, like the whole like, oh, right. Instead of saying go woke, go broke, we're going to say go woke, get yoked. You know? So there's that. And also like how they're going to advertise. It's like, oh yeah, take this movie. The Deep's like, yeah, take this movie of mine. Like if a white person is watching it, all they'll see is like, because it's targeted advertisement. So it's like, yeah, this alcohol is going to be for you if you're white. But if you're black, it's going to be so-and-so cognac. And you see some black people, the crowd going like, oh, what? Didn't sit well with a lot of people, but it's like, oh, that's so effed up, but also hilarious. But hilarious because it's so weird and effed up. But I'm sure that is something marketing people do think about and do purpose. But it's like on the fly, like it's meant to be like the future of your advertisements in a movie will change based on your ethnicity. So we have all that going down, and just like I said, the phases 9 through 17, once again, shots at Marvel, of all the movies they've got on the like timeline and everything. So like I like to believe like people at Marvel, like some of the higher ups can take a joke. They'll be like, oh, because it makes you wonder. It's like, you're kind of like Kevin Feige, for example. Has he seen any of The Boys? Because I mean, it wouldn't be the first time they've like taken shots. I feel like James Gunn because Kevin Feige is a comic book nerd too, so I feel like James Gunn and Kevin Feige are such comic book nerds. I could definitely see them being like, oh, actually being real big fans of The Boys. So I'm curious how they feel about some of these shots being fired across their respective bows, so that's just kind of interesting. But obviously that's just kind of like the more fun, like lighthearted stuff that's kind of going on at the time. And obviously A-Train has to promote Training A-Train, which is just like, yeah, it's a movie that's so near and dear to my heart. He has to like swallow those words. I'd almost wondered if he was going to pull a Starlight and be like, yeah, this is all BS, but it's like, no, A-Train's always been kind of funny enough to say like a company man. So he's always kind of went with the status quo of like, yeah, this is it. I also don't want to rock any boats, considering I've kind of like helped out The Boys and I don't want to get murdered by Homelander. Because Sage is still looking for the leak. She doesn't believe that got nipped in the bud with Annika. She's like, even talking to A-Train, like, yeah, it's not like the evidence ran out of crime analytics, am I right? And A-Train's like, well, if I can help you, just let me know. And it's like, haha, cool. So that situation is screwed. So A-Train's dealing with that, being like, cool, Sage, she has an idea, she knows, but because that's the thing of like, we don't know how much Sage knows. We know she's pretty smart, she's pretty good at analyzing stuff. A theory I saw floating around, I want to say it was the break room. They had kind of wondered if she was actually, was it the break room or was it somewhere else? I remember hearing someone being like, what if she's not actually a soup and she's faking it? She could be like pulling some mentalist shit. Great show I need to circle back to at some point in time. I've referenced that previously in a different review a while back. But anyway, like, you know, he's not psychic or whatever. It's just he's very good at reading people and faking it like he was a psychic because he did that for years and stuff. So what if that's her shtick? Like, she's not really, but no, it's like, no, that we sell the whole lobotomy thing, so that kind of throws that out the window. So, but it's like, maybe she's not as smart as she thinks she is, or because who knows how far ahead she is in everyone. But it's kind of something that Firecracker says to her where it's like, yeah, you think I'm like poor white trash. And it's like, oh, I don't think you're poor. She's like, you're going to look down on me, and you're not going to see it when I come, like when I strike you. And that's the thing. Like, she's like, you look down on me so much, you're not going to see it when I shiv you in the back. And like, it did seem like she took that to heart, because I guess like in her mind, it's like, once again, she's got 4D chess playing in her head, so she probably reads, okay, this is going to happen, this will most likely happen. I'm sure she breaks things down from a probability standpoint of like, well, this is most likely an outcome, so maybe throughout all like her run-throughs in her heads of how her grand plan, whatever it may be, is playing out, she sees that, no, there's a, you know, kind of, they might be like parroting a little bit of a Doctor Strange, ergo, i.e., Infinity War, 14 million different possibilities you saw type of thing, and in a lot of those possibilities she's seeing like, oh, there's a good chance Firecracker does end up killing me, because from what we could tell, once again, there's a whole conversation about soups of like, they have some level of superhuman strength and endurance, but they do have someone like the Mesmerizer, who once again, Butcher just bashed his head into a sink. So like, some superheroes are barely durable. They're practically human with just special abilities. Seems like she might be in that boat of no superhuman strength or whatever, or powerful endurance, because she's worried about going blind in her eye in case the lobotomy needle goes in the wrong way. So she is just extremely smart. So she is capable of dying like potentially any normal human. So probably a regular person could like end up killing her. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. Like I said, it just comes down to how much she knows, and that goes back to the A-Train thing. Does she actually believe, like, oh, did A-Train, like, jumping ahead, does he actually get away with everything? Or is she just playing him, luring him into a false sense of security? Because it's like, by letting you get away with it, you're going to act like this, and instead of A, B, and C happening, X, Y, Z is going to happen, and I prefer that outcome. I don't know. She's playing everyone on this team, and I just don't know like how much she's got this mapped out of. She wants A-Train to be on his back foot because that leads to him working with Ashley later on, and the fallout ends up being what it is. So how much of this is according to plan? How much is it that she knows? We just don't fully know, and we probably won't know until the end of the season of like how much of this she saw and how much just she planned out to the exact details. So I was picking up on that, like, when they were on stage, Cameron and Deep, when, like, Deep kept, like, dogging him. I'm like, what the hell is that about? And it turns out that Cameron's the one that did the story about how Deep got canned when it came to the whole crime analytics thing. He's like, hey, you know, to appear fair and all that, you know, I got to take some shots at the home team every once in a while. But it's like, it's all good. He's like, I can retract the story. He's like, no, the damage is already done. So Deep is beefing with him over that. And it's like, well, if you weren't incompetent in your job, you wouldn't have to worry about it. But it's like, yeah, we got to keep some of this bot stuff hush hush. To be fair, you're the one that's the easiest to throw to the wolves than anyone else, because it just shows you no matter what you do, you'll always be bottom of the food chain when it comes to VOD. So there's that element to it. We also, it ain't just Deep who's got beef with Cameron, which I even love later on. He's like, oh yeah, like your wife, I'm gonna have sex with her, and I'm not, because I don't need to breathe, I'm just gonna be like drowned, I'm gonna be swimming in her juices. I was like, Jesus. He's like, oh, if you do that, I'm gonna basically, like, I got a package already ready for your 8-arm hand, in reference to Ambrosius being like the 8-arm hand jobber that she is. To Deep, he's like, you wouldn't, and he's like, yeah, try me. But staying on Cameron, him and Ashley, which I thought that was wild. I was like, Ashley's like, oh, did anyone tell you to take out your Bluetooth vibrating ass? And I'm like, what is this, a hentai? Like, what the hell? But then also part of me was like, that's not supposed to be like a reference and wink and nod to that chess thing from like, was that like a year or two ago? The whole thing of like the guy was, there was, I don't know, there was no, I don't think there was anything factual about it, but the rumor was like, hey, guy is cheating because he's got anal beads that basically are vibrating to let him know what moves to make. That was like the whole conspiracy theory to it, you know. I haven't followed up in that story in so long, so I never found out what the end result of that was. I don't know if this is supposed to be a wink and nod to that. But what was it? Like, he's like, wait, did you want me to come on stage while in front of all like those fans and stuff? And she's like, yeah, I want them to see you for being the queef sniffer that you are. He's like, ooh, didn't want to break it to you. I was like, whoa, and he dumps her because she's not the dommy mommy that she once was. He's like, yeah, you were running things, you were actually kind of dominant, but now it's like, you're kind of not, so I kind of need I need to find someone else that's more my speed. And he's like, I hope we can still be friends. And it's so sad because like Ashley's losing everything. It's like, I'm stuck at this job I don't want to be at because I've got a crazy ass overlord like Homelander, and the one like power, like, you know, because Ashley is all about control. That's why she does the whole domination thing anyway. She needs to alleviate a lot of that stress, and she is stressed out a lot. But sadly, Cameron is breaking up with her, so like her release and relief has been taken from her. So later on when A-Train was kind of like, yo, we got to work together because I got to let you know I'm the one that leaked all the information. And now she's like, dude, she's like, are you trying to get me killed too? I'm going to die by being an accomplice. I got to tell Homelander. He's like, you do that, like, I ain't just going to be me going down. You will be going down with me because we made a deal, you know, back at Homelander's place last episode. So how did Ashley resolve this situation? She threw Cameron under the bus. I was like, wow, that's so interesting. These side characters that have been like, you know, pop up every once in a while. Cameron's probably been like one of the minor characters that's popped up the most frequently. Probably next to him would be like Seth and Evan. If either one of them gets it next, it's going to be sad because they're such recurring minor characters that it's so interesting. Because it's like Annika, like, yeah, got it in episode 3, and it's like, wow. Like, it's not like we saw her a lot, but she popped up like every once in a while in the show. So it's just kind of like, oh yeah, these kind of more minor characters are getting got. So I wouldn't have expected Cameron to get got. So it's going to be interesting to see like who replaces him now that he's died, or how is Vought going to cover that up. I wonder what the full result of that was, because it's like, yo, we're going to basically beat the brakes out of this guy, because it's like, well, Deep got some blows on him, being like, oh, it's also like, I'm going to be fucking your wife tonight. That's still happening. And then, like, we saw Firecracker land in some blows. So everyone in unison is supposed to beat his ass. So what was interesting is Homelander was like, A-Train, I specifically want you to cause some chaos, like havoc or whatever, cause some pain. So I'm like, I don't know, like, A-Train probably had to get some licks in too. Or maybe he specifically wanted A-Train to handle things a very certain way. It's like, I don't know if he wanted him to get Blue Hawked. It sounded like he was pretty much done from some of those fleshy blows we were hitting. Some of those squishy, fleshy blows we heard. So, who knows? So, it covers up the leak. But once again, he thought that was all good and kosher the moment Annika died. But now it's like, oh, Cameron's dead. And Ashley was super happy about that. It's like, oh, you're going to dump me, motherfucker? Get fucked. So, it's like, oh, like, that kind of felt good for her. It's like, oh, like, taking a little bit power back for herself. So her and A-Train, that's going to be such an interesting dynamic to continue to see going forward. I referenced Firecracker. She's playing up victim on television and trying to play into the whole notion of, you know, that conversation about when does life begin for a fetus. You know, because they're trying to like push the narrative even more for Starlight of like she's a horrible person. Like what happens like when you abort a bit, you know, leaning into that, and also like, oh, look what she did to me. It's like, what was like she said that line of like, oh yeah, like what if you are a baby or kill it? She can't make up her mom. Which I'm like, well, it's weird that you would use that word considering like you had a relationship with a 15-year-old. Once again, we're kind of moving past that. Starlight's also getting blamed for Ezekiel's death. It's like it's easy to throw all that shade her way. Like we saw like the Starlighter house being like destroyed because people breaking in there, tagging up the place. So yeah, that's we haven't seen the full effect of. We saw Singer last episode, but we don't know how many people at the Starlighter house have bailed. We'll probably have to wait. Probably maybe the next episode or two we'll kind of get to see like the conversation of, well, the people who are on her side, any lefties that might have, well, for lack of a better term, left her side because she's not the gold standard. They thought like, oh, she's the pinnacle of all things good, and now it's like, oh, we find out this and that, even though it's like, well, a lot of the stuff that Firecracker has said about her has never been bad enough, but it's like, because you had an image in your head of like she was like this perfect symbol, and now you find out like, oh, she's a human, she's flawed, she's made mistakes, she's not allowed to make, it's that thing of you chastise the right for certain things, but you can also cannibalize your own movement for the purposes of trying to be even more good and more righteous type of situation. So like, once again, it's a conversation about extremes on all sides. So we didn't really get that as much this episode, but that is something to kind of keep in mind going forward, because, no one else was at the office. I mean, to be fair, it's like, well, people are probably rummaging through the office, so you don't want any of the staff being there, but we don't know where all of them stand now. Well, Colin's out of town. It's like, well, yeah, he's avoiding Frenchie, and Frenchie's like not letting anyone know. We'll talk about some of that more later on, especially Starlight's side of things. But circling back to Vought, Adam is pushing the TV show that Ryan's supposed to star in, but Homelander, now that he's kind of cleansed himself of a lot of his humanity, or at least seems like he is, he's weirdly enough a better father to Ryan to some extent, because it's like, hey, all that stuff I was kind of pushing on you before, that's kind of BS. But it's like, well, no, you still had your ulterior motives, because you made it clear to Barbara last episode, yeah, my son isn't human, just like I am. I'm not human, so neither is my son. I'm going to raise him that way. So you're presenting this way of like, right, everything's fine. I'm not going to push you or manipulate. Yeah, because I was manipulated so much throughout my life, and now I'm finally free. He's like, we're emancipated, emancipated slaves is his exact word. So I was like, cool. Well, this is also the same guy that said, free at last. Thank God I'm free at last. Last season. So same guy. So it kind of makes sense that he would kind of like keep that kind of narrative kind of going this season. But he's making Ryan feel like, oh, you're going to listen to me. It's like, there's almost like this Stockholm thing going on between Ryan and Homelander, because at the end of the day, that is still his dad. So it is there is love there, because you have spent the past 6 months with him, and he said all the right things before, and yes, he makes mistakes and he's trying to do better. So it is this kind of roller coaster of you saw a scary side of your dad, you've seen your dad not be the best person, but it's like you want the best from him, because at the end of the day, he is your dad. You were like, yeah, I don't want Butcher to be my dad, I want you're my dad. So him kind of showing a side of like, right, I'm not mad at you, I'm going to back up whatever decisions you make. And even Homelander bullying Adam, which I love that he still brings up the Minka Kelly thing. He's like, hey, I know that he was like, that was kind of like a misconstrued situation. I brought this up during Gen V. Why Minka Kelly specifically? I probably still had the same point, even if it wasn't Minka Kelly. If it was literally any other actress, like I even said this during my Gen V review of like, yeah, it probably had the same point, but it's just like Minka Kelly is so very specific. That I'm like, that seems too specific. I'm like, why Minka Kelly? My thought at the time was like, well, because she was in a DC project, she was Dove in Titans. I was like, is that like the why you specifically chose her? I don't know. Or has PJ, the actor who plays Adam, like, does he have like some kind of like connection through line to Minka Kelly in real life or something, the reason why she was chosen? Or did you just go through a Rolodex of actress? Maybe someone connected to this show has a connection to Minka Kelly, why they specifically reference. I don't know, because like that's the whole reason why he was at Godolkin, was because he Louis C.K'd in front of her. So but either way, like Homelander bullies him, gets Ryan to bully him into taking his his car and his card, and it's just like, oh boy, this is a mess. And then Ryan's starting to feel it more and more, but he's like, oh, that power, like we already saw it creeping in at the end of season 3, but as extend a little bit in the first episode, but as time is going on, you kind of like, okay, like maybe there's some hope for Ryan, but it's like, no, that need for like power that Homelander has, it's there inside of Ryan too. And I guess it's almost like what was kind of instilled, or rather, it was already there in Homelander, the need for love and attention, but they just like heavily modified it to become the thing that they could use to control him. And I think Ryan, like, wanting some power and control in his life, considering so many choices were made for him, it's like, oh, choices Grace had to make for him, or his mom made for him, or Butcher made for him, or even Homelander to a extent. Now he's kind of feeling free. That's what that smile at the end of at the end of season 3 was about. But now it's like it's coming back, because it's like, oh, he's finally feeling himself, because like that need to feel powerful, to never have to, like, basically kowtow to anyone else, it's there in him. So that's kind of coming to the surface. And he got the assistant Bonnie to repeatedly slap him, and you're just like, oh boy. I mean, especially after we got that last episode where Homelander, like, you know, did what he did to Frank and Marty. So now, like, having Ryan doing on a smaller level as he's drinking, like, his milkshake. So getting him good with the milk. He was denying it in episode 2 and 3, both the milk celebration in episode 2. No, the milkshakes was in episode 2. The milk was in episode 1. And so now it seems like you finally got him on the bandwagon. He's becoming a mini Homelander, and it's just like really getting into it, like feeling the power of, like, yeah, making you people feel insignificant beneath him. So, but either way, we have Homelander kind of leading charge of being like, right, no more like celebrityism for superheroes. We're going to be wrathful gods. We're going to save America. And it's like, right, we're going to have to be these wrathful gods. And I'm curious if all of you are going to be on board. He's got the 7 there. He's also got Tech Knight. He's also got Kate and Sam. So I already knew they were going to be in this season. I don't know if this is going to be the only episode they're in. I wonder what this might set up for season 2 of Gen V as well. So either way, what Homelander envisions going forward is going to be interesting to see. We don't have really an idea of what, I mean, besides trying to save America, but we don't know what that necessarily looks like. But I'm sure the coming episodes will give a much, much clearer definition on what that entails and what that the viewer. It's so interesting because it's like him saying the whole thing about wrathful gods. It's not just Ryan he's trying to get to become less human. I think he's also trying to get everyone else around him. It's like, I'm going to stand at the top of all this like Zeus, but the rest of you will be like the gods beneath me as well. It's actually interesting because like there's the whole Caesar through line that like Sage set up in the first episode, but then it was like the whole thing from Firecracker, because it was like, oh, like what? Because I know Caesar got stabbed, but wasn't he stabbed? Wasn't he literally stabbed in the back, or was he stabbed multiple times? I don't know enough history to kind of, but it's like I feel like, yeah, when he was stabbed in the back, wasn't he? Like, wasn't that what happened to Caesar? Like, or was he stabbed multiple times? I can't remember. I was like, I wonder if that was supposed to be that connective tissue there, connecting that line of like, oh, referencing Caesar from Sage when she had that conversation with Homelander to now Firecracker referencing stabbing her in the back. Next side of the episode we're going to cover is the hospital stuff with Huey, his dad, and his mom, which his dad seems to be in better health and everything seems good. And you're like, okay. Well, it doesn't seem like there's any issues. No powers have developed yet, but it seems good. Huey ends up talking to his mom, like, why'd you do that? Because obviously everyone's been suspicious of his mom, like, there's something there. Still could be, but for now, she kind of waved it away by being like, well, obviously you brought it because you wanted to use it, but you didn't, so you dropped it, so I decided to use it because you already lost one parent. I didn't want you to lose another one, especially the parent that was there for you, who is fundamental for you being the man that you are today. So me being gone like is already one thing, and yeah, I'm back in your life, but this is the person that was always there, you know? Even when Huey himself has admitted back in season 3, he didn't appreciate his dad for a lot of stuff. But now it's like, yeah, you are back. I love the pizza roll thing still continues to show up because he's like, wait, which kind was it? They didn't have pepperoni. He was like, oh, it was definitely Supreme because they had the little green peppers in them. But yeah, she made that decision. It doesn't seem like there was any nefarious intentions behind that. It seemed like that was her attempt to try and do good. Maybe. It also plays into a running theory has been that some people have had is, hey, is Huey's mom real or is that in his head? It's like, no, it seems like she is real. It seems, not unless there still ends up being some twist of like, well, the people who interacted with her were Huey and his dad wasn't in his right mind. But I'm trying to think, like, did his mom interact with anyone else throughout the episode? I was like, that's still unclear, because I'm like, I actually don't think she interacted with anyone except for Huey and his dad. So it's like, that's still a possibility, but I'm leaning more towards the thought of, no, his mom is real, but I feel like there's still room for some minuscule amount of doubt that she's not real, that she is just in Huey's head. We'll see. But either way, you knew something was up. I mean, it's sad because, like, for the first time, like, Huey's got an entire family there. Everything's good. Him and his mom and dad are reminiscing about the past, like a trip they took and a place they stayed. But then, like, his dad's memory starts slipping. He's like, oh, where'd your mom go? It's like, she went to the bathroom. Right? He's like, oh, yeah. I'm like, interesting. They also had, like, that conversation of, you gave her power of attorney. He was like, it's the thing of, he's like, he knows Huey's not a child anymore, but he uses, like, a Jar Jar situation. What was it, like a cat or something? And it's like, right, you were so intent on not letting that cat go, because he's like, you have a big heart, you love people, and you never want to let them go, which is a great thing when it comes to these type of decisions. You wouldn't be able to do the right thing. He's like, I don't want to have a Jar Jar situation of me shitting and bleeding, like being in such a painful state at the end, because you never let me put Jar Jar down. And it's like, you would never be able to pull the trigger in that respective situation. So he's like, I didn't want to be in that. I don't want to be a Jar Jar in that situation. And that struck a chord with Huey, because it's kind of a hard thing to hear. But I think he also recognizes where his dad's coming from. Because he's probably thinking to himself, I mean, I came to the conclusion of I was going to let you go. You know, so I think there's also a little bit of like, well, Dad, I came to that decision. I was literally going to let you go. If it wasn't for Mom interfering, like, you would be going. We wouldn't even be having this conversation right now. But it's also kind of like backhanded, where you're kind of like, so that's how you view me? Like, you think so little of me, but it's also like, yeah, but there is truth to it. Like, would I be able to let Dad go? And I mean, Huey already knows that about himself, that he's like, yeah, I can be very clingy when it comes to the people in my life. Like, his refusal to ever give up on Butcher, him being clingy to Annie, being like, yeah, you're the best thing in my life. You think I'm not stupid enough to let you go? I even love his mom being like, oh, no, you need to lock that shit down, you idiot. Like, gave him her engagement ring to give to Starlight. So it's like, yeah, but he's like, I don't know if we're there yet. And then we get the reveal about what Huey's dad's circumstances are. Now, a lot of stuff in this episode plays into the notion of what I've talked about previously, of my understanding about superpowers and stuff like that. I made a video talking about, theorizing about, right, like, obviously powers seem to be a genetic thing of, if a parent has a certain power with V, the child will most likely have that power. And I was wondering if the vice versa would be true. Well, we saw what Huey's powers looked like. Granted, that was on 10th V, so maybe it's a little bit different. You know, it's a whole other concoction. So maybe if he had gotten regular V, would he have gotten the same abilities, or would his abilities been the same as his dad? Or would, because his dad has phasing abilities, whereas Huey had teleporting abilities. But maybe the argument could be on some superpower scaling. You could look at it as maybe they're in the same family tree. They might be distant cousins, but they're part of the same family tree. So it's like, but it also goes back to what I've talked about previously too. I didn't talk about it in the video. At least I don't think I did. I think I meant to talk about it, but the whole notion, and I've talked about this in some reviews where I think I've equated this show's superpowers to the show Misfits. If you've ever seen the show Misfits, it's about kids with, not kids, they're like teenagers / young adults with superpowers. Basically, your powers reflect your personality. So, for example, there's a character named Simon who always felt invisible around people, like no one ever saw him. So when he got superpowers, what was his superpower? It was invisibility. There's a guy, there's a character who kind of has a dissociative situation going on. So what happens? His name is Rudy. He literally splits. Rudy, played by Joseph. God, blanking on his name now. He played Cassidy in Preacher, if you've ever seen the Preacher TV show, which obviously Seth and Evan were executive producers on, yada yada, connective tissue. Either way, the reason why I was bringing this up, the relevance is that Huey's dad, he felt like he was never seen. So, by Daphne, because that's what he was so pissed at. He was like, you never saw me, and his powers kind of flickered. So you're like, Okay, so that's where that stems from. I mean, Huey's whole thing is, you could make the argument his teleportation ability, it's like fast travel. It's a little similar to the speedster who ran through your girlfriend, So you can make that comparison, but also like, hey, Huey has a weird ability because he just, he's kind of he's a little bit of a coward, so like it would make sense that kind of he'd have an ability that would basically make him teleport and kind of be, butt naked. There's parallels you can draw between personalities and stuff, but this kind of breaks my theory of like I said, they're cousins to each other, but it's not a one-to-one of like, whatever powers a parent has their child has, and if their child has one, like I said, maybe the difference is that Huey's dad got original recipe compound V versus Huey who had temp V, but then there's a whole Zoe and Victoria conversation, because I was under the impression, I don't know what, I think I was under the impression like no suits could really have, but I don't know why. I guess in my head I thought Victoria was like sterile, just like Homelander was, because that was like him having a kid was supposed to be like, oh, that's not possible. It's like, well, he was an experiment, so that's the difference. But it's like, for whatever reason, I thought Zoe was adopted. I didn't know that was Victoria's biological kid. So nothing ever really stated otherwise, but it was just like that was always some assumption I've had. So that's why I was like, her and Victoria having different abilities made sense to me. So it's like, okay, so it's a very fast and loose rule. There's no like concrete evidence of just because you have a power doesn't mean you're like Victoria being the head popper, but also bloodbender that she is doesn't mean Zoe would be one. But then I've talked about it before too. How does that change based on your parents? Because it's like, well, maybe the strand in her that gives her the mouth tentacle ability doesn't stem from Victoria. Maybe that comes from her dad. So, right, like with Huey's teleporting abilities, it's like maybe that's not from his dad's DNA, maybe that's from his mom's DNA. So maybe if she had V in her system, she'd have teleporting ability. Like I said, I don't know how that works on a genetic scale and level and yada, yada, yada. I'm going on this massive tangent, but either way, Huey's dad kind of went psycho and he's killing people. First, ripped out a person's heart, which is, that sucks big time. And he's not in his right mind. He's forgetting stuff. He's thinking like, no, Huey's 11. You're not my son. And then he kind of is chasing after, he starts running away, phases through a wall. Oh yeah, I was trying to think, I was like, haven't we seen someone with that ability? It's like, yeah, the dude that Jordan was like banging it out with in, I think it was episode 3. Yeah, episode 3. He had the phasing through wall ability. Either way, like that was so twisted where like Huey's dad like just got in the middle, like phased into that guy laying on a bed and became solid and kind of just killed him, was like shifting and turning in his guts. I was like, that's fucked. But yeah, like he just starts killing people by just reaching into their chest and like pulling out their hearts. It's like, that's all kinds of fucked. So he's kind of acting deranged, and Huey's kind of calm under pressure, which his mom made that whole comment in episode 2 of like how she's good in stressful situations. She's like, why are you so calm? He's like, I've actually kind of been down this path before. So he's trying to find something that could knock his dad out, because he's like, right, V already messes people up, normal people up, but now it's like, well, his dad was brain dead, and so probably some functions of his brain were probably shut down, and when you because he was off his feeding tube for a while, so like his brain, he was already brain dead already, so it probably came back a little zombie-ish, like not in a traditional sense, but like in some sense, I think you could look at it as a little bit of a zombieism, considering his brain being what it was, so. But Huey was able to kind of talk his dad back to his senses, but his dad was like freaking out. It's like, what am I supposed to do? Like, what did I do? Like, oh my God, like I've hurt people. I don't want to hurt anyone else. Because Huey's like, no, it's me. He's like, no, I know it's you, Huey. I just don't want to hurt anyone anymore. And Huey makes a decision to put his dad down, because he's like, right, either we leave dad in this state and he's going to go to prison, or he's going to hurt more innocent people, or he's going to get locked up in an asylum, and that's not what, for one, it's not what dad wanted. He didn't even want to come back, and I forced this on him. So you got to live with the trauma of, regardless of your mom pulling the trigger on this situation, she would have never been in a position to do that if you hadn't brought the V to the hospital. So that is still on you. It's like you still had this time with your dad to say what you wanted to tell your dad. It's like, right, we went to pick up that Tech Knight toy when I was 11, and I was $8 short. But it's like, no, like he was my favorite hero is what the whole conversation was. But it's like, no, you're my hero, Dad. And I just needed you to know that. You just never have enough time, but he wanted to be able to say what he wanted to say to his dad. All the stuff they miss, and like him, you know, like that stroke came out of nowhere, and it's like you took that time with your dad for granted, and now he has it back, and so he makes that choice to spare his dad. It's like, right, it's not going to hurt. This is your way, my way to like set you free, and just let you know that I love you so much. And he's like, I love you too, son. And it's like, he's not leaving Huey alone. He's got Daphne, and just that sweet moment they have at the end, the bittersweet moment of, yeah, like, oh, he's like, you know where I want to go? And it's like Paris. He had brought that up earlier in the episode. And it's like, yeah, like the three of us, we can go, you know, check out the places where like the Da Vinci codes are really at and stuff in Paris. And he passes, and it's just, the one parent that was there for him is gone now, despite everything. And it's like, did you do more harm than good doing what you did? Yes, because innocent people are dead, and you kind of had to go through the trauma of like, you ended up having to let him go either way. The end result's the same to some extent, because you had to let him go, which you did, but you also had to be responsible for killing him, kind of euthanizing him, and then, but there's also more blood on your hands because you let this go. It's just, there's a lot to it. There's going to be a heaviness to this for Huey to carry that with him, knowing like he was responsible for that in a lot of ways. So that's definitely going to be interesting to see, and what this means for him and his mom's relationship going forward, you know, because obviously it's like she knows like the past can't be forgiven for everything, but it's which recurring theme in this season as well. But you know, she's all Huey has now. So, and finally, aside from all of that, we have the boys trying to figure out what they're going to do next, and Butcher finally decides to tell them about the virus. You know, I never even thought about that earlier in the season, because we know that Grace told him to keep an eye on Indira at Godolkin, but I guess Butcher never reported back to her what he found about the virus and stuff. He just got that on his own, and he kept that information to himself. Because, I mean, it makes sense because, like, no one on the crew knew about it. But it's like, yeah, after all this time, like, you've known we have no idea how long it's been since season 1 finale of Gen V. And we have no idea, like, how much time passed during some of those events of Gen V's season finale. So could be a couple of days or weeks before after everything went down on the campus when Butcher showed up. So it felt like it was probably like a couple days. I mean, you never know if that could have been like immediate, but he's been sitting on this probably definitely for a while now. So, but he finally brings the information up to him. It's like, oh yeah, this will kill Soups. And now it's like, cool, you're having this conversation in a room with two Soups, Kimiko and Annie, which he doesn't give a shit about Annie, but he's like, because he had talked to Joe about it. It's like, yeah, Annie's one thing, who cares? I mean, he doesn't even call her Annie, he calls her Starlight still. But it's like, yeah, Starlight's whatever. But Kimiko's a good killer, which she wants nothing to do with that. She's very good at what she does. She is very proficient. She does not like it. She will do it in self-defense. Well, except for the times with, like, the Shining Light, where it's like, yeah, I'm getting my get back, so I'm going on a rampage to kill you motherfuckers, type of thing, so. Which, speaking of Kimiko, her and Frenchie are not good. Both of them are internalizing a lot and keeping it to themselves, being like, oh, she's like, are you good? And he's like, yeah, I'm good. He's like, are you good? She's like, I'm great. Cool. We're both in denial. We're bottling stuff up. That's super healthy. That's super good. That's super, super good. So there's that. We end up seeing Daddy Gus, Stan Edgar. I wasn't expecting him to pop up, because we have not seen him since literally over a season ago. Like, episode 4 was the last present day we had seen him. Obviously, there was a flashback with like Noir's like cartoons, where like we obviously heard John Carlo's voice when he was voicing the like cartoon weasel version of Stan in Nicaragua, you know. So, But canonically, like, we never heard what happened to Edgar. So it turns out, like, oh, well, I mean, he was being charged with all the stuff that Newman threw his way, but it's like we never knew he got arrested and stuff like that. You thought he was rich and powerful enough to kind of skate by, but probably a lot of his assets got frozen, so he probably couldn't really do much because it was probably open and shut with what was kind of presented. So he initially turns down the deal that MM and Butcher bring him to, like, oh, let's go up against Newman. But it's like, yeah, regardless of Newman throwing me under the bus, I'm going to tell you the same thing I told Homelander last season. She did what I raised her to do. There's not more to it. It's like, yeah, but what about Zoe? Which I think it's so interesting that that's what struck a chord with him. It's like, because he does look at the V situation as it makes monsters. Because regardless of it all, he does view Victoria as a little bit of a monster. Like, she does scare him. So it's well, I don't know. It's hard to say, like, what actually scares Stan Edgar, but I mean, I guess, like, the notion of Zoe not being a normal girl scared him. Because it's kind of similar to Madeline. Like, she presented such a front, like, oh, everything's Gucci. Like, oh, yeah, I love and care about you, Homelander. But it was all a front for her fear of him. So maybe Stan has a similar thing with Victoria, where it's like, yeah, you put up a front of, like, you love her and care for her, but truth be told, you're afraid of her. Because the only person that's part of the boys' crew that's not a part of this is Huey, because he's dealing with everything on his own. So they take Edgar to, like, a farm, which is where, like, the virus most likely is located. So they go there, and they find the place is in shambles, and a whole bunch of animals were being tested on and injected with V. Specifically Temp V. And there were regular vials of V there as well. I'm sure they were trying to see what were the effects on V versus Temp V. There's also, Butcher had, like, this is kind of that borderline moment for Butcher where we see, like, him trying to be good. He lets a bunny out and sets it free, and Kimiko's the only person that saw him do it. So, and her smiling, being like, yeah, you can be such a dick, but you also can be a good guy, can't you? It's like the walking enigma and contradiction that is Billy Butcher. But he made it clear in episode 3, being like, yeah, I'm not a good guy. Despite everyone else trying to be like, yeah, I kind of have a good heart, but it's like, do I really? Maybe at one point in time before the whole Becca situation, not just like her dying, but like, well, when he believed she had died, and those 8 years of trying to get revenge against Homelander, at the beginning of the series, like, the good man that he was. To be fair, it's like we're all products of our environment and our circumstances, nature, nurture type of thing, of the circumstances that made Homelander, the circumstances that made Billy what he is. So specifically his dad and everything with Lenny. So, but yeah, it turns out the vials are gone from, like, cool. So we don't know at the time. You're like, well, did they perfect the virus? What's going on? Don't have any time because Newman shows up. Now, when Annie started trying to use her powers, I was like, whoa. I was like, is that Annie just being so in her own head? And, she's psyching herself up because, like, the psychological trauma of everything has blocked her, like, from using her powers because she's kind of losing control. But another part of me was almost like, you don't think Newman's able to do that, right? Because, I mean, V is in the blood, so she is a bloodbender, so could she affect the V in people's blood or not? That was kind of a question, because they can definitely sense the V in blood, as we learned with Gen V, like her and Marie can do that. So maybe they can alter and affect that. But turns out no, it ended up being purely psychological on Annie's part. But it's like, yeah, we kind of have to work together. Another shaky alliance with, like, two of the people you probably can't trust the most. Two people you want to take down the most. Also, Butcher got called out for his BS of, oh yeah, trying to sell out Huey's information about the Red River to get what he wants. But it's the whole thing of, I'm not an asshole. I mean, I am an asshole, but I wasn't an asshole in this particular situation because I didn't go through with it. So it should be fine. It's like, once again, it's always one step forward with Butcher, 2 steps back. And people... I mean, Annie's already kind of given up on Butcher in a lot of ways, but every time she's willing to give him even a monochrome of a step forward, it's just like, you disappoint me and prove me time and time again that I shouldn't trust you. But yeah, like once again, Annie is continuing to be on shaky ground because she's talking to Newman, who's like, yeah, like you. I mean, I appreciated you like beating every living shit out of Firecracker, but at the end of the day, you're kind of falling apart at the seams. And she actually had this really interesting conversation where she's like, right, I'm still Nadia. Sometimes I want to let Nadia out, but it's like, no, I got to be victorious. So it's like you were Starlight for so long, you forgot who Annie was. In that moment, she punches her in the face, and kind of it proves Victoria's point. But it's like, yeah, like Annie struggled like letting go of Starlight because being Starlight has defined her life for so long, because she was Starlight while she was doing those pageants and stuff like that. And what Starlight represented, it represented what her mother wanted her to be, what other people wanted her to be, whether it's the Seven and this, and like she's had an identity crisis, and that's why she's falling apart, because it's like, because people are attacking her as Starlight, but like there is a difference between Starlight and Annie, because I'm not Starlight anymore, but I had to present myself as Starlight to get people to listen to me, and now people are attacking me both as Annie January and as Starlight, and I'm finding myself somewhere trapped in between of who is me, like what is the mask and what is the real me. Once again, the DC versus Marvel conversation of, hey, the superheroism is the mask and the regular person is the real you, or the DC side of things of, oh, the masked person is the real you, whereas the quote-unquote normal version of you is the disguise. So Annie's finding herself towing that line of not knowing, plus she has to deal with all the pain of everyone calling her out and knowing all this about her, like something she suffered and agonized through being thrown and weaponized against her by a piece of shit like Firecracker. So I should also note, once again, I always want to throw this out there, like, right, no shade or anything against Valerie Curry, the actress who plays Firecracker. I'm talking about the character is a piece of shit, nothing against the actress. I always feel like I always have to point that out when I like go like, yeah, oh, this character's like piece of shit, yada yada. It's like, I mean, because a lot of times people do not delineate between a character in a fictional show and the person portraying them. It's like, you're doing a great job. That just shows your talent as an actor, where you're like, I hate this character. It's like, you're supposed to, you know? So it's just, once again, just like Anthony Starr in Homelander. It's like, he does such a fantastic job. Starlight staying on that front, she did have this interesting conversation with Frenchie, where Frenchie has like a rosary with him, and she's like, oh, I never knew you were Catholic. It's like, yeah, he is. And even had that conversation of like, does she believe in God? And she's having trouble with it, and he does. He believes in a lot of stuff about it, but like the one thing he's still hung up on is like the whole penance thing. He's like, you get to just be some random priest in a box. You get to just tell him all your sins and they get to magically washed away. For him, it's like it's easy to forgive, but to be forgiven, he kind of thinks being forgiven is complete bullshit, because he's like, I've done too much to be forgiven for. So he doesn't believe that it's possible. And I'm curious, like, I think Annie's on the thought of like, yeah, people can be forgiven and redeemed, and it's just, we were only focusing on it from Frenchie's point of view. I'm curious how much of that did Annie take upon herself, because once again, she's in her own head this episode, so it could be a situation of what Frenchie was saying about himself. He wasn't thinking about her while he was saying that, he was just speaking on what he's done, but there's still the possibility that Annie internalized some of that too, and you know, because like her powers never like, she never like, oh, pulled out her powers like this episode. It's like, once again, she's kind of been like out of commission the entire episode because of. But obviously the farm situation ended up being a lot more fucked than you kind of thought it initially was going to be, because we have a whole bunch of soup animals. I do love that we introduced elements in previous seasons, because what was the hamster's name? Jamie? Because even when they were talking to Samir later on, you had Frenchie and MM be like, oh yeah, that was your first mistake injecting a hamster with V, and they're looking at each other like, oh yeah, because of the whole Jamie situation last season in Russia. So that kind of was like what everything kind of went wrong. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of animals. You got chickens, you got a fucking bull, but the bull didn't get a chance to do anything because it got ripped apart by a whole bunch of flying fucking like almost vampire-ish looking sheep, ripping it apart and flying in the air. It's like, this is so fucking weird. It's like, but like I said, did you take that one concept of you had the Jamie thing and that was it, and just a one-off thing, and now it's like, oh cool, now you have super powered animals, farm animals going fucking bananas, and it's so bloody and crazy. That poor Secret Service lady who got ripped apart. First, the Secret Service dude got a chicken literally flying through his chest and exploding him. And then the other lady, like, she was trying to hop over a fence and she tries to jump. And then, like, a sheep comes and, like, impales her as she was, and flies and rips her pieces as they're eating her, just like they were eating the bull. The whole thing is fucked. But they ended up meeting Samir, which that actor, I'm trying to remember what the most recent thing I saw him in. I can't remember if it was, like, the last season of American Gods, or was it, I feel like it was probably, it had to be maybe Fear the Walking Dead, because that was like season 7 was the last time you see him. So yeah, I'll leave that. I was about to say a spoiler, but yeah, so that's probably the most recent thing I saw him in. But yeah, it turns out he's Zoe's dad. And apparently, he's like, oh, he was like the head of R&D. And so it's like, yeah, and he deflowered my girl, which, like, Newman's like, dude, I was 20. There's plenty of deflowering that happened before then, but this is really not the time or place to really stress about that. So it's actually interesting because, like, you rarely get to see Newman care about anyone. She cared about Huey, but we saw how that all played out. And she was willing to pop his head if need be, but she still had her reservations about it. It's kind of interesting to see her, like, we've seen, like, her care about Edgar, but we've never really seen it, like, the way we saw her care about Samir, we've never seen her interact with anyone, like, whether it is Huey or whether it's Stan. Like, there's a little bit of it, but not to the same extent of, like, that concern she had, and like how they held each other. Like, it is, like, you can feel how real that relationship is, that she is concerned about him. But yeah, there's only one syringe left of the virus, so what are we going to do with it? Well, we can inject it in his body, and then, because it can be traced, like, the virus can be transmittable blood, semen, and stuff like that. And I love Frenchie's own impression, like, oh, like, that guy's in no condition to have sex with that body. And then Edgar had to be like, no, you idiot, we'll toss the body out there for them to eat. And he's like, oh, I was like, what the fuck is wrong with you, Frenchie? There is a big disagreement about how to handle this situation. Like, what should we do about the virus? Should we get out of here, try to make a run for it? But it's like, cool. And he's like, yeah, I'm not keen on the idea of leaving Mother's Milk and Frenchie behind to kind of get ripped apart by this sheep as I do or die just to get this virus out of here so we can potentially kill Homelander. Even though it's still not strong enough, we can at least have this to still have on standby, ready to be modified so we can actually kill Homelander when the time comes. But it's kind of all a moot point if we kind of die trying to get out of here. A lot of not trusting people. You know, Edgar's deal to get Zoe away from Victoria was kind of brought up. Just like, oh, you shaded my deals and my business, I'm going to shade this old man and his business and kind of throw a wedge between you. This is where MM had to kind of step up. It's like, yo, I want to get back to my daughter and survive. So Annie, you can't fuck up people however you want to. Victoria, the fact of the matter is you don't want your daughter growing up in the foster home system like you did. Butcher, you can be an evil son of a bitch, but, you know, you could be a motherfucker, but you're a motherfucker with a heart. So the fact of the matter is I just want to go home to my baby girl. And, you know, especially where things kind of are there right now, where she's kind of mimicking him, and it's like she's all about the whole, like, right, telling people the truth about what. That's why she popped off on the kid, the boy. It's like the boy was a very very home teamer type of thing. She told him the truth about Homelander. He didn't like it, said some effed up stuff to her, so she popped off on him. So it's like, right, violence isn't the answer. It's like, you know, it's like, no. What about you, Dad? You've resolved situations like that. And it's like, well, do as I say, not as I do. I mean, Janine even says, like, she's like, I lost a lot to this superhero shit. I don't want to lose more. It's like, well, Todd was a victim of the superhero stuff. She had already lost MM. That's why they got divorced in the first place, was because of all of that. They fell apart because of the superhero stuff. And it's like, I don't want it to consume my daughter the way it consumed both MM and Todd. They ended up dumping the body. The sheeps went for it and proceeded to throw up, get sick, and die all all of them. So everyone managed to get out of this okay. But then Samir's gone. And eventually, like, the feds or whatever, maybe Secret Service, whoever shows up and finds his severed leg. You can't help but immediately be like, yeah, Butcher had something to do with that, didn't he? It's like, when would he have had time to cut the motherfucker's leg off? But it's like, well, maybe Joe did. But once again, how much of that's like, we still don't fully know Butcher's circumstances, because the rabbit he let go earlier in the episode, he found it not dead, but he saw a parasite coming out of it. So he's like, cool, so that's what's happening to me. That's what a lot of people's theory was about what happened to Ezekiel. Was like, cool, a parasite is literally inside of him, festering off of him, trying to survive. And how it manifests itself, does it look exactly like it did with that rabbit? Or like, what does it look when it comes to Butcher? So he's kind of piecing it together that that's probably what that looks like. But yeah, him and Joe have Samir. Now, I've kind of talked around it before. It's pretty obvious what I was talking about, but I was trying to talk around it before. Running theory is wondering whether or not Joe is real. Once again, Becca's the angel on the shoulder. Typically, if there's an angel, there's a devil. So Becca's the angel, Joe's the devil. Especially because he's supposed to be like who Butcher was before. Like, Butcher's always tried to change, but, zebra can't change its stripes, type of situation. So, which has always kind of been his philosophy towards Soups, and now it's like very true about himself. And it's like, right. So the Joe thing, it's still unclear, because Samir, when Butcher was like, yo, all you have to do is work for us, or like he said we, and you see Samir kind of turn to the side where Joe is, and you're like, it's either in that moment he is actually looking at Joe because Joe is real, or he's kind of looking like, wait, who are you talking about? Like, because he had a look almost like, what the fuck are you talking about? I expected him to say something in that moment, but he didn't. So, because people keep thinking like, right, the reference that's used in this regard is Sixth Sense, which is obviously interesting pop culture wise for that to come up. Came up in a certain. Actually, I was about to say like, no, it came up in two songs. It was like Euphoria and Not Like Us. He referenced like Haley Joel Osment and specifically Sixth Sense by name. Well, he did it in Euphoria, and then he's like, "Shh, I see dead people" in the opening, the intro to Not Like Us. Anyway, tangents and all that aside, so it's kind of like maybe Joe is someone he knows, but Joe's been dead, and maybe on some level he knows that, but psychologically he knows that, but his brain, or rather it could just also be like the thing of like he is dead, but maybe Butcher just never knew that information, and it's his natural conscience, which is in the form of Becca, versus the parasite, which is in the form of Joe, because it needs to feed off the evil, it needs to feed off his anger. That thing just picked the most evil person that Butcher sees a lot of. A person that personifies all that anger and willingness to do whatever it takes inside of Butcher's memory and manifests itself in Joe. I don't know. I also love, once again, the constant parallel between Butcher and Homelander. I didn't even think about it until just now, because I was like, oh yeah, the episode ends on Butcher giving the most sinister smile ever. I'm like, you look so like Joker psychotic. But then I was like, wait, how did last episode end? It ended with Homelander covered in blood, smiling the most devilish smile, and now we have Butcher doing, well, he's not covered in blood, but he did something shitty, and now it's like he's smiling dastardly, like fucking diabolical. So it's like, right, the continuing to hammer home, these two are the two sides of the same coin. I wonder what's Newman going to do. She ended up setting Stan free. I was almost wondering, like, are you going to head pop him? But it's like, no, you're not going to. Because she did get on Edgar's case about the whole Zoe thing. It's like, oh, like you're saying I made her a monster. I protected her. Unlike you, you're going to throw me under the bus. Like, I just did what I could to protect my daughter. Unlike you, yeah, you helped me, but I was always a means to an end. That's not the same thing for me and Zoe. Maybe the argument... No, I was about to... I don't want to, like, make that false equivalency I was going to make in my head, so I'll keep that in mind. So, but yeah, like a lot of stuff Homelander said in episode 3 resonated with her, where she was just kind of like, I don't want my daughter to ever feel ashamed, because you tried to hide my powers and everything. because obviously we know from like the Vought standpoint, it's like, oh, like blood powers, ill, gross. That's not sexy. You can't really sell disgusting abilities like that. In Marie's case, hence why her and Victoria had like the camaraderie, because it's like we know what it's like to be hidden away and kind of seen in a shameful light. Well, for her, it's like, okay, so you felt that way about me, but I'm not going to feel shameful about my daughter. Like, all the stuff Homelander said in episode 3 really did stick out to her. But I'm wondering, like, what does she do now? Like, that, I mean, is she going to kill Edgar off screen? I highly doubt it, but it's like, well, I guess it's like with everything going on, with everything with Homelander's beyond anyone's control. I wonder, does Edgar know about what went down in the labs? Because Sister Sage knows that he went home, but I don't know if Edgar knows. But to be fair, he's got his hands in so many pies and connections that he most likely does know. But it's like, because he made the point to Victoria, like, there is no controlling Homelander. You're hoping to use the virus to control him. It's like, that's not going to happen. And finally, we had the whole Frenchie situation. Frenchie turns himself in at the end of the episode. Once again, it's like, well, you're saying like there's no penance, but you're trying to get punished because like, well, Colin won't hurt you, he won't kill you. Because Annie had that conversation with Frenchie of like, why don't you talk to Kimiko about it? He was like, right, I'm afraid that if I do tell her, she'll hate me, but then I'm also scared of what if she doesn't hate me? Because I think hating him, it's like a little, it sucks, it's heartbreaking, like this person I'm close to hating me, but I think for him that's an easier pill to swallow than her forgiving him, because then it's like, oh, there's so much pity, because they both have done stuff they are not proud of, you know? She's killed people before, she's probably killed innocent people, the whole girl from last episode thing, which they haven't had an opportunity to talk about it. Like, everyone's got their sins they have to bear, but Frenchie wants to bear his alone, and he's always been like that. That's not something new. I keep going back to the point of the whole Sherry and Jay situation and Mallory's grandchildren lamplighter situation. Like, all of that, like, he never wanted to be let off the hook, and he kind of doesn't want, and in this case, he wants to be punished. Whether it's Colin, is like, right, you rightfully have all the right to kill me, but then it's like he wants to punish himself. It's like, is this really the right time? It's like, well, you're not in the right frame of mind to really help out the boys because you're just so busy punishing yourself, and you want to be punished. You deserve to be punished in your mind. And he thinks this is the only way. And the sad thing is that's happening just when Kimiko finally like reaches out to him to be like, we can't probably fix each other's situations, but we can like hold each other's hands. And so we'll have to wait to see where not only that, but all of this ultimately ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.